Hello, Wes. How are you?
You doing well yourself?
Good. My name is Alan. Pleasure to meet you. We've talked on the phone. On
I'm
email.
gonna set up my microphone on my phone. It's a little bit better for me. 1 second.
Great. Now can you hear me okay?
Perfect. How are you today?
Excellent. Very good. And yourself?
Good. Starting the day.
Great.
Bright and sunny.
Yes. It's rainy here, but starting a good day though.
Where are you at the moment?
I'm in Minnesota.
Okay. Excellent.
And how about yourself?
In Bogota.
Very nice.
So thank you for agreeing to do this.
No problem.
We're just waiting for everybody to join in 8 minutes, but I just wanted to make sure that everything was fine. And just a little bit of background, we're Latin Pacto. We're a network for philanthropists and social investors in Latin America. We're formally started this year, but we have links to other networks in other regions. So in Europe, it's called EVPA. I'm not sure if you heard of them. And there's also a chapter in Asia and Africa.
Okay.
What we try to do is promote venture philanthropy and all its practices.
Excellent. Very nice.
And Carolina just joined, but I think we scared her. And Carolina's our CEO, and I'm in charge of knowledge management.
Very nice. How often do you host these calls?
Well, we started a lot of them earlier this year, and now we're probably doing once or twice a month in terms of webinars. But we have, this is actually part of our community of practice on innovative finance. So we meet once every month. So it's a small group because it's more about learning and sharing experiences. But because we think this is an important issue for the rest of our community members, we will be streaming it on YouTube.
Nice.
Hello, Alan. Hello, Wes. How are you?
Hello. Doing well yourself?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for joining us today and to share your
No problem.
experience with us.
Hello, Isabel.
Alan, did you need any help from me, from my side?
No.
Okay, so I will
I'm not sure if
mute.
you want to do opening remarks, closing
No,
remarks.
you can. No, it's your session.
Our session,
Okay, so I will be on mute.
So Wes, I'm not sure how much information Ben gave you, but the idea is to keep this very informal. I'll just do a very quick recap of what we've been doing in the community of practice. And then I'll introduce Ben. And the idea is that Ben just tells a little bit more about what the Delta model is. And then he'll facilitate a Q&A session with you and Sarah. And then we'll
Great.
invite our community members to ask all the questions they might have.
Excellent.
So it should be very easy and laid back. There's Ben. Hello, Ben. Good morning. Hello, Ben. Can you hear us?
I can. Good morning.
How are you today?
Doing very well, thank you. How about you?
Good. It's a lovely library you have back there.
Oh, thank you. I was Hey, Wes. I was
Hey, Ben, how's it going?
good to see you, man. Yeah, I was
You too.
I don't know. I was watching I was watching the conversation between Darren Walker from the Ford Foundation and Sir Ronald Cohen, and everyone has some big library in the back, and it's like you got to show your book apparently. So I've like kicked everyone out of the house, and I'm like, okay, I'm taking over this room so I can showcase my books.
But you know, there's even an industry now of consultants who like even send you like a kit for you to have like nice backgrounds and everything. It's
Oh my
like
gosh.
image advisors.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
But my wife made a lot of fun of me of like, what, who cares?
Oh, that's nice. Ben, how did the rest of the event go? I thought it was amazing. It was really fun to follow and listen in. So congratulations, and
Oh, thank you.
yeah,
It was great.
hope it went well.
Yeah, it was a wonderful, beautiful event. And at the very end, we had a virtual bonfire, and everyone kind of shared like we always do in the circle. And it was great, and we had great turnout. Yeah, I felt really good about the whole evening. Thank you for being there.
No problem.
Yeah. Hey,
Hello,
Sarah.
Morning, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Good, and you?
Doing
Good.
well.
Yeah, doing well. I enjoyed the event too, Ben. It was fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, you were great. You were great. And a little
You did a
preview.
great job, Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Wes. I know. Now we get to have a full in-depth conversation with a lot more spectators, I assume. Yeah, the sun's just coming up for me. I don't know if this backlight's going to become an issue.
Yeah, early morning, West
Early,
Coast.
your coffee, your tea.
Yep. Ready to go.
So, Alan, so just can we go over this schedule really quickly? I guess you'll do an intro. I'll kind of give some context, and then we'll get into a conversation with Sarah and Wes. I'll ask some questions. Won't take too long, so we can get it as interactive as possible as soon as possible. Is that basically the plan, or is there something else we should know about?
No, I think it's covered. So I'll just make a very recap of what we've been doing in the community of practice, and then introduce you, and then I'll let you introduce Sarah and Wes. And then maybe you can just start by explaining what the Delta model is and summarize more or less your thoughts on what you wrote on that article, and then maybe facilitate a Q&A with Wes and Sarah of, why they also, how are they involved with this and why it's important for them.
Perfect. Perfect.
We should start in about 5 minutes.
Okay, great. I'll just say, Wes, I'll probably, in my comments, I'm going to sort of try to give a little context and why kind of standardized grant products are necessary. I'm not going to go into too much detail in my opening remarks, but I will probably ask you to speak first, because I think it'll be helpful for you to talk about what EOS does, the community you're serving, what you could do with this money, so that people just understand the kind of need for this kind of financing and actually the impact that is produced by it. And then, and so that's probably my first question to you. And then Sarah, I'll go to you, and I'll kind of similar to at the Gore anniversary event, I'm gonna, I'll kind of ask you to share some of your thoughts as an investor, and then, a little bit about what attracted you to this, particular model. And then based on sort of how the conversations are going, I think, I can ask a follow-up question or two, but basically what I really want to do is showcase how this type of grant is really effective for different kinds of stakeholders, because you need to align all the stakeholders. And that's what I think is it's a great opportunity. Thank you, Alan and Latin Impacto, for us to be able to share from our own distinct perspectives why this made sense for us. And my goal is that more philanthropists and impact investors use this kind of standardized product in their own impact investing strategy. So that's kind of, you know, my goal. And I hope, I'm sure this conversation will help elucidate a lot of the reasons for why people should, you know, be excited about it. So that's my kind of game plan.
Sounds like a good game plan.
Great.
2 more minutes and we'll start. Hello, Maria Jose. You're mute.
Hey everyone.
Hey, how are you?
Hello.
Good, thank you.
Morning.
Hello, Maria. Good morning.
Hello, Juliana, and Michelle, and Agustin.
Hi, how is everyone today?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm great too, thanks.
Hello, good morning. I'm Augustine, Mexico.
Hi there.
Bienvenidos.
Morning.
Gracias,
Hello
Ben.
everyone, Michelle from Brazil.
Hi, Michelle.
Hola, buenos días. Good morning, everybody.
Hello, Carmen, another Mexican, and Natalia from Brazil as well.
Miss Joynes.
Hola, Carmencita, no te he visto casi.
Híjole, qué bruto. Voy por mis lentes, ahorita prendo cámara, voy.
Hola, Sami.
Hola, buenos días.
Hola, Sami.
Buenos días para todos.
Buenos días.
Buenos días todos.
Hola, Natalia. Buen día. Hey, Alan, do you already have people on YouTube?
I don't know.
Lina says that there are 15 people.
Hola, Pablo.
Hola, hola, ¿qué tal?
Hola, Pablo.
Hola, Cecilia.
Ups. Hola, ¿cómo están?
Bien. Y María Patricia también, bienvenida.
Sí, muy buenos días, ¿cómo están? Gracias.
Iniciamos en 2 minutos, Alan.
Sí, 9:05 en puntico.
Vale. Faltó su música.
Estamos charlando aquí. Ahí está Manolo. Hola, Manolo.
Hola, mi estimado Alan, ¿cómo estás?
Elegancia.
¿Cómo ves? Pues es que estoy aquí con la gente importante de Latinoamérica.
Ah,
Hace mucho no me ponía mi saquito, pero pues ya ves.
pero lo dices por Agustín, alias el padrino.
Exacto, de Godfather,
Hombre,
exactamente.
no, seguramente debe estar viendo un financiero ahorita que le está bajando una lana.
No.
Que le está pidiendo que invierta.
Exactamente, muy bien vista, bien dicha. Bien bajado ese balón, como dicen los futboleros, Agustín.
Buenos días, Enrique.
Buenos días.
Tenemos una buena delegación de México hoy.
Nada más hoy.
Nada más hoy. A María José.
Siempre, siempre.
¿Verdad, María José? ¿Verdad, María José?
Okay.
Estamos muy activos.
Bueno.
So it's 9:05. I think we should start.
Yes, please.
Welcome everybody to our community of practice on innovative finance. Today is a special event because of its importance. We decided we're going to live stream it on YouTube. Usually these are closed sessions, but because we have such a great panelist, we decided to share it with the rest of the community. just a couple of words in terms of recommendations. If possible, please leave your camera on. That will allow us to facilitate the better learning and exchanges. If you're not speaking, please put your microphone on mute, and also put your name and name of your organization and your Zoom profile, so that way we can facilitate better the Q&A session. For today's agenda, we're going to introduce, for those that are new to Latimpacto, what Latimpacto is. We're going to do a little recap of what we've been doing in our community of practice. And then I'll let Ben facilitate the rest of the session, where he'll talk about his new recent article about new funding models. And he will facilitate as well a Q&A panel with 2 invited guests, which we'll introduce soon. And then we'll have, obviously, like always, Q&A, where the idea is that you use this space to learn. So please make sure you ask very difficult questions, but do have fun. And we'll finally close with conclusions and next steps for our community of practice. So for those who are new to the Latimpacto community, we're a community that groups social investors and philanthropists. And our main aim is to generate and optimize impact, social and environmental impact. And we do this through 3 things. One is through connections. So the idea is to connect the community members to mobilize financial, human, and intellectual capital. We do knowledge, which is to exchange and disseminate best practices on venture philanthropy and social investment, impact measurement, tailored finance. And we seek to amplify and have one voice in order to do advocacy and communicate and showcase best practices that are happening in the region and internationally as well. So just to recap what we've done in the past in our community of practice, this will be our 5th session, sorry. The first session, we met for the first time. We decided what was the objective of this community of practice. Then we had a guest, thanks to Manolo from RSF Social Finance, where we studied more this concept of tailored finance. And then we had 2 excellent presentations from 2 our members, Fondo Vale and Humanice, where we talked about blended finance and mezzanine finance. And lastly, we had a session which was very interesting, where we did a clinic where a foundation from Colombia, ICE Fundación, came with a specific problem about how to use loans as a catalytic capital instrument. And he wanted to find new ways of helping rural cooperatives around Colombia. And with your excellent advice, we discouraged him to do it. And it was an interesting exchange of what, how a community of practice can learn and then use that knowledge to help others. So this was an interesting session, and thank you those for joining us. So without any further ado, I'll now give the word to Ben Powell, who is the founder of Agora Partnerships and until recently its CEO. Ben obviously has a very interesting curriculum. Besides Agora, he used to work also for the White House and for Ashoka. But what I like most about Ben is his entrepreneurship skills. And back in the day, I believe Ben was co-founder of a golf course in Mexico, the miniature golf course. So that's what I like most about Ben. So he knows how to have fun. So Ben, thank you for joining us, and the floor is all yours. And just to start, Ben, please tell us a little bit about why you're here. What is this about the Delta model, and who are the 2 other guests we have here today?
Fantastic. Thank you, Alan. Y bueno, bienvenidos a todos. Es un gran honor estar aquí con ustedes. Esta discusión vamos a tenerlo en inglés, así que muchas gracias para su paciencia. I'm really, really happy to be here, and I'm really happy that Latimpacto exists. I think that the mission of the organization is critical and truly focused on one of the most important, leverage points that philanthropy has, which is investing in people who have sustainable models that can deliver social impact and that can deliver a kind of spectrum of return from no return to market beating return, while also creating measurable impact for their communities. And I think that's why we're all here, is to try to figure out this really tricky problem of how do we identify the most promising teams of entrepreneurs, how do we support them, how do we finance them, and how do we ensure that we have many success stories that can help to to inspire a whole new generation of entrepreneurship and really kind of build back better a better stakeholder driven version of capitalism that is more successful and delivers a bigger bang for the buck than what we have right now. So I just want to first thank you all for being part of Latimpacto and spending your time and energy and resources on this really important challenge of how do you increase the agency of the best, highest potential entrepreneurs, in Latin America. How do we do that? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, I think we all agree on the importance of entrepreneurship. And if we want to dig deeper to understand, well, how do we really support and catalyze successful entrepreneurship at scale? How does one do that? We're learning a lot, and we've learned a lot over the last 15, 20 years on how to do this. And I would like to make the case to you that entrepreneurship does not thrive in desiccated environments where there's no support or financing. Therefore, entrepreneurship requires a vibrant, robust ecosystem of support in order to flourish. Now, how do you develop that ecosystem? I think the clearest way to do it is to identify organizations that are actually focused on solving that problem. They're focused on supporting entrepreneurs, putting entrepreneurs first and foremost, and they develop their own internal capabilities to be able to identify and recruit entrepreneurs, to put them through a training or leadership program that will get them prepared for investment, and that then also help them to close the deal and to drive resources. And it doesn't have to be just financial resources. It could be mentors, it could be media exposure, it could be market access. Okay. So these entrepreneur support organizations are absolutely critical to building the ecosystem. And what I have written about in my article is really about how can we design a new grant product that can be standardized, that can allow foundations and impact investors who want to support individual companies and entrepreneurs, but also who want to support the ecosystem at the same time. And so what we have tried to do is design a new grant product. And this is really important because, as you may know, right now in our industry, everything is pretty bespoke. So if you're a nonprofit and you are trying to raise money to support a cohort of indigenous entrepreneurs in Colombia, let's just say, you have to design your own proposal, find a funder, you work on it together. It's it's the way that we do business, but it also can be very costly and time consuming. And so there is, I would argue, a large need for grant products that can be standardized, so that you know as a funder what the product is and what the expected outcome is. And it is standard across geographies, industries. That way you can begin to test whether it's working or not. And you have real transparency, and you lower the friction costs, which are so dangerous in our industry, because it takes a long time to do small deals. And because it takes a long time to do small deals, many investors don't want to do small deals. Instead, they would rather wait until companies have been further de-risked before then kind of going in and making an investment. And that is totally understandable. However, if you're truly trying to create catalytic funding, catalytic capital that will change the trajectory of an entire organization, and you want to do this with relatively little money, there are not a lot of efficient ways to actually do that today. And I would argue that the Delta Fund model, which we'll spend the next hour or so talking about, is a really effective grant mechanism that serves both the needs of funders, investors. It serves the needs of the entrepreneur support organizations, and it supports, obviously, the entrepreneur. And I think it's really important, as we think about all of this, is that we just remember that at the end of the day, it is the entrepreneur that's on the front lines. It's the decision of the entrepreneur, the thousands of daily decisions that they make that will ultimately determine the success of that venture. And so it's in our interest, it's very much in our interest to be able to build a system that can surface great potential, and then allow that potential to be visible so that it can receive support and funding. And so this is in many ways a data management, a communications management challenge, but it is a huge challenge. How do you create an efficient system so that you surface the best entrepreneurs that will deliver the greatest social impact? And that really is what this whole conversation is about. So let's talk about what the Delta Fund is, and then I'm going to introduce our two very esteemed panelists who are really in the middle of this. The Delta Fund, I will just explain it very quickly because we'll really get into it later. But in essence, what it does is it's a partnership between three different organizations: an investor, an entrepreneur support organization, in this case, Agora, and an entrepreneur. And this is how the partnership works. The entrepreneur has a problem. The entrepreneur's problem is that they need financing. They need it quickly. They need it yesterday. And they need it on terms that they can afford to repay. And oftentimes when you're dealing with very early stage companies or even nonprofits that are trying to extend themselves and act more like a for-profit, meaning being able to access the impact investment capital market, and being able to return capital, learning how to act more like a responsible borrower than simply a nonprofit that receives grants. So organizations, whether they be for-profit companies or nonprofit organizations that have a social mission, are desperate for capital. The World Economic Forum just came out with a report that said the financing gap in Latin America for SMEs is over $1 trillion. So there is a huge need for capital, but it's very hard to come by. And when you do come by it, it's often extremely expensive and costly in all kinds of ways. So how do you deliver for the entrepreneur the kinds of financing that they actually need at that moment in their life cycle. For the investor, here we are talking about, this is a grant product. So we are talking about investors who can make grants and who can also make more traditional investments. Now, if you are an investor and you are looking to dip your toes into impact investing, but you don't want to go out and just make an investment because it's hard to be successful making investments in impact investing, especially early stage where it's much riskier. So what do you do? How do you engage in a targeted intervention into the sector that will produce something that you care about and that will also have ripple effects across the industry? That's the kind of grant, I think, that you're wanting to make. One that has an immediate impact, but also that has a system-wide impact, and that contributes to the growing integration and sophistication of the impact investing industry and the social innovation industry, if you want to call it that, in Latin America. And then finally, if you are an entrepreneur, if you are an entrepreneur support organization like Agora, and your mission is to drive opportunity and resources to entrepreneurs, you have a couple of challenges too. Your ability to do your job well requires that you can hire and retain, the best staff, the best team, people who really understand entrepreneurship, that you can build a strong network of organizations that can refer companies to you, and that you can maintain a strong relationship of investors who might be interested in providing investment to the companies that you work with. So to do all of this requires a strong business model. And as you may all know, in the field right now, we don't have strong business models, in particular for nonprofit organizations that are focused on supporting entrepreneurship across the region. So we need to be thinking about the health and safety of all of these entrepreneur support organizations, some of which are larger and have been around for a while, many of which are new, and they are staffed by really energetic young people, but they're still under-resourced. So having a product that will in effect reward entrepreneur support organizations for doing a really good job, what we like to call pay for performance, right? You're paying for actual results. You're not paying just to tick off a box to say, oh, well, we worked with X number of entrepreneurs. That is a different industry. That's the whole USAID contractor universe, which has not been super effective for lots of reasons that I won't go into right now. But when you actually are listening to organizations that are local, that are on the ground, that are tremendously committed to their communities, when you listen to them and support them, you support the whole ecosystem. And so the question is, how could we design a grant product that would align the incentives and the interests of these three stakeholder groups into one product? And the Delta grant product does that. How does it do that? Well, we'll hear about that in a second, but at least from my perspective, it does that. And I'll talk a little bit from the perspective of the entrepreneur support organization. It does that because it allows entrepreneur support organizations to be compensated for doing a great job. So in this case, what happens with the Delta Fund is that a donor or an investor will donate money. In this case, Sarah donated $50,000 through her foundation. It's actually $100,000 through her foundation for two investments. And the first one we're going to talk about in a moment with Wes. And well, she'll tell you why she did this. and what her thinking was. And we did this because the way it works is she donates to us. We take that money and we work with her to identify a company that we're going to invest that money in. In this case, EOS International. Once we do our diligence, and we've already done our diligence to some degree because we only work with companies that have already gone through our program. So for us, there's not a huge transaction cost to find more companies. We have a limited pool of companies that we have vetted, that we believe in, and so we can bring those companies to the investor. We together come up with a decision, and then we make the investment. And now when that investment is repaid, it's a 0% loan, 0% loan because it eliminates all kinds of bureaucracy and regulation. It's very easy to make, but it's also it's a recoverable grant technically. So Wes will be repaying Agora the loan at 0%. If for some reason he is unable to repay the loan, there's no collateral. There's not much we can do about it, and we're frankly not going to really go after him. But we have written the contract, and we have an agreement that Wes knows that he's going to do everything he possibly can to repay this loan for lots of reasons that make sense for him. And so, so we're not too worried about that aspect of it, but that's one reason why it's a 0% loan. When Wes is able to repay that loan to Agora, we are going to reinvest that money in a different company. And then assuming that that company is also able to repay, when we finally get that money back, Agora gets to keep it as an unrestricted grant. And that is very important because if you are a nonprofit organization, unrestricted grants are extremely valuable because they allow you to spend that money in the best possible way for the organization, given the organization's needs and strategy. So, so we are very incentivized at Agora to make sure that Wes is successful because we also would like to get that money. And we would feel that if we were able to get that money back and relend it and get it back again, that is signaling something to the market. It's signaling that actually we have a pretty good operation here to identify high potential ventures and invest with entrepreneur friendly capital and then get that money back. And that is a message that we want to project to the industry, because if you are an investor or a philanthropist, it is sometimes very difficult to figure out who to partner with, who's doing what, who has a track record, who doesn't. It's not a particularly clear field at the moment because the field is growing and it's growing by leaps and bounds. And in fact, Latimpacto's arrival now to Latin America, I would consider to be one of those moments of leaping forward and organizing capital and knowledge in a new way that I think will be very, very beneficial to the field. All right, so with that sort of intro, I would like to get a conversation going. So I want to introduce Wes and Sarah, and I'll introduce Wes and then ask Wes to speak a little bit, and then I'll introduce Sarah and ask her to kind of respond. So let me first introduce Wesley. And Wesley is, he's a former Peace Corps volunteer, kind of fell in love with Nicaragua, and has built a truly impressive organization, really focused on delivering clean water to underserved communities in Nicaragua and now Central America. And so Wes, could you, thank you, by the way, Wes, for calling in. And if you could just tell, I think it would be helpful to talk about the mission of EOS and the social challenge that you're dedicated to solving, and then maybe talk a little bit about how this Delta grant is helping you to do that, and whatever other reflections you want about the experience. Go ahead.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Ben, for the great introduction. Also, Alan and the whole Latin Impacto team. It's a pleasure to speak with you all. So as Ben said, I work with the organization EOS International, Emprendiendo Oportunidades Sostenibles, and I co-founded it while I was in Nicaragua as a Peace Corps volunteer with another Nicaraguan, Alvaro Rodriguez. And we provide safe drinking water to rural communities. We are kind of providing a niche product for water quality solutions, specifically for established water systems. So we're not going out and drilling wells, establishing new water systems. We're going into what's already established. And there are over 12,000 rural water systems already in Nicaragua and Honduras, the two countries that we operate in. And I actually found when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, that the water may look clean. It's piped from maybe even an underground water source, but over 90% of the time the water is contaminated with bacteria. Good news is that the bacteria can easily be treated, and that is really the solution that we provide. So we go into rural communities, test their water, and upon finding out that there is contamination in the water, then provide treatment or filtration. And we're looking at the community size, the community scale. So some of these communities, population up to 1,000 people, again, rural community size. But we're able to provide treatment, which is a very economical solution that can treat the water and continue treating the water so the water is safe to drink all the way into the home. So we actually started out as a nonprofit, and I now consider us a nonprofit social enterprise. And we started as a nonprofit because we were meeting a social need and thought that that was the best legal structure for us to go about it. And very social, going out, promoting and providing these solutions, but quickly found the importance of, earned income and having, skin in the game, or having the investment from the communities into the products. And then actually going through the opportunity to go through the Agora Accelerator back in 2016, one of those years, with Ben and his team, and really realized the impact that we can make transitioning our organization from a nonprofit to really a social enterprise. And however, we have kept our same legal structure in the US, we're able to harness more and more earned income and really accelerate our growth. And so since going through the accelerator and then actually really changing our business model, putting a heavy emphasis on the products and services that we offer our community, we've been able to significantly scale. So today we're working with over 500,000 rural Central Americans with over 1,500 rural communities. And so our model includes going into a community, testing the water, providing water treatment, but then having ongoing chlorine tablet sales on the back end. So we have continual sales to these rural communities. And actually, we've been very fortunate, the silver lining with the COVID, the coronavirus, the global pandemic, that there is an increased need and demand for our chlorine tablet. And so we've been able to really leverage this, and this opportunity with the Delta Fund has actually come at the perfect time. I think we closed the deal in January and really have used these funds, and actually have cycled the funds to ourselves several times because we've just seen significant growth in our sales. And so for us, being a small organization and really getting into the impact component and actually taking on impact investing, this Delta Fund was a perfect vehicle for us to really kind of experiment and build up some business credit. And so it was harder for us to just start off with a big heavy loan and terms, and even just having our financials and everything. It was a steep learning curve, but this opportunity really helped us get to that level. So working closely with Sarah and also with the Agora team, we're able to kind of do the due diligence, prepare our financial reporting, and get us prepared for taking on larger amounts of investment. So we were able, from our perspective as an entrepreneur, we're able to see this, yes, as a recoverable grant, but we are looking at it as a loan. Also, the 0% interest is obviously very favorable, especially for the entrepreneur, but also give us the opportunity to take some bigger risks. So we were buying chlorine tablets and materials in smaller purchases at a time, and then selling that and going back and buying more. And so for us, this really helped us. The primary investment for us was for working capital. So buying in larger amounts of inventory, getting bulk prices, but also putting some money into marketing, where we do simple marketing, making some brochures, but now in March, April, put out some really heavy marketing campaigns. We were able to hire a graphic designer, getting radio campaigns out to really kind of sell our products. And we saw huge growth because of that. People knew our name and were coming back to us and buying more and more. And so we, it's hard to say, but I don't think we would have been even been able to make this investment into just the marketing without having this, $50,000 saying, okay, we have a little bit of cushion of cash to make this investment, and it's paid quickly. And so just from our perspective, this has been a really unique and very amazing model that now, we've already started paying it back, and now we're talking about what does the next step look like. So it's a perfect kind of stepping stone for us to kind of get to that next level. And so really, really happy with where this is, and hopefully that can provide a little bit of a background from our perspective.
That's great. Thank you, Wes. That's super helpful. Well, let's turn to you, Sarah. So Sarah is represents a new generation of philanthropists. And we gotten to know Sarah over many years, built a relationship with her, and co-created this concept really with her. Because if you don't have a funder that is willing to work with you and learn with you and take risks with you, then good ideas just kind of die, right? So you need someone who's willing to put their money where their mouth is, and Sarah has absolutely done that. So Sarah, could you share a little bit with us about what the World Impact Foundation does, your mission, and what you were trying to achieve with the Delta grant?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here and a wonderful opportunity to kind of share our thoughts on this concept. So I'm really glad to be here. World Impact Foundation, we're a private foundation based out of Los Angeles, and our regional focus is Latin America and the US. Conceptually, our mission is to promote affordable access to basic services, and our work is twofold. We aim to help nonprofits transition away from donor revenue to earned revenue. So really focusing on that sustainability aspect and promoting those social enterprise models. And the other end of that is direct debt investments into social enterprises that are seeking to scale. And for that reason, that's how we were in touch with Agora. And obviously, Agora has some fantastic companies and fantastic entrepreneurs and a great community of support. And what we were seeing was consistently really great candidates coming through across the board, even outside of that pipeline partnership, but recognizing the unique challenges a social enterprise faces, especially one that's a hybrid model. So understanding, especially in the context of EOS, for example, the water access paradigm is often better suited to the traditional aid model, but this is a great example of pushing against that a little bit at scale. And what we are seeing with companies is that there's a precipice in terms of transitioning away from donor revenue to earned revenue. And as a foundation, we're uniquely suited to be able to support that transition. And previously, these were kind of two silos. Our grant making was one silo, and we're helping to scale or introduce pilots for income generation, and our debt investments were another silo. This Delta concept is it's almost a bridge in that activity. So not only are we supporting Agora alumni companies and continuing that Agora relationship of support, but we're also continuing that spectrum of financial support that we can offer as a foundation to one specific company. And that's the hope here. So it's beneficial for everyone involved. For us as a foundation, we thought, let's dig deeper into this relationship with Agora. We're getting really quality candidates. They're willing to work with us. And we're meeting a lot of great companies that just aren't quite ready to take on working capital debt, but their model, they need inventory. They have those needs in the future. So let's push them a little further to get there in a way that they've already done. They've already shown that they've worked with Agora. They've already performed. They have a sound business model, sound practices, and let's help them get further. So that's where this concept came from. And we had conversations, I know very early on, Ben and I said, oh, this company's great. They're a little early. What do you think about taking a grant for us on behalf? And we thought, yeah, that would be great. And these passing ideas, passing conversations kept coming up. And we thought, okay, let's be more strategic about this. I remember meeting you, Wes, and that was exactly my thought at an entrepreneur retreat. And I was like, I love the model, love the impact, but it doesn't quite fit into the debt portfolio, at least not right now. Let's keep in touch. But instead of just passively keeping in touch, this program allows us to say, okay, let's provide this as a grant to Agora, which is great for us. It meets our grant making requirements. And let's promote the use of this recoverable grant as working capital. Just as Wes has alluded to, it allows essentially a higher level of support, almost like working capital loan with training wheels and no interest rates, allowing you to be a little bit more creative in terms of reducing costs while you secure inventory, really transitioning away from that donor-based revenue to earned revenue, which they've done a fantastic job. Even as of Q1, they've hit their goal and exceeded their goal. But also in terms of benefits for us, we're supporting the company's growth strategically, and they're working with Agora, so they're getting entirely custom support alongside that. And what we do is provide impact support and financial management support. And the duration of this period is 12 to 24 months. So really, it's kind of like a long diligence period for WIF. It's a very high engagement kind of activity, quarterly reporting. Let's talk about the business model, what's going on. And for us, everyone's familiar with everyone else. So in my mind, this is kind of de-risking the future follow-on investment. So once everything's repaid, we have not only assurances that there's a strong impact alignment, we have evidence of that. So metric measurement frameworks in place, good financial reporting and management in place. And that's not only good for us specifically, but for other investors should the company want to raise capital. So in terms of that, it's really beneficial for everyone involved. And for our specific program-related investment debt portfolio, it's fantastic because, as I said, the diligence period has already started and we're able to grow alongside with the company, which is our utmost goal, to be flexible financing partners for companies as they continue to grow. So from our perspective, it's a fantastic concept that really does align the different incentives of each party.
Thank you, Sarah. That I couldn't have put it any better myself. That was wonderful. And I think you underscored something that is really important just to remind everyone of, which is that there's a resilience theme here. This theme of helping nonprofits to increase their own agency by figuring out how to earn revenue and not be so dependent on donors. That is a theme that we are seeing all over the world, and especially in Latin America, as resources are dwindling and as people are forced to be more creative. So there is a resiliency play here to actually help entrepreneurs, give them that opportunity to try to diversify their revenue streams. And that is really a gift, I think, that that many nonprofits need, but don't have access to. And I think Wes is a great example of someone who's really taken advantage of that. All right, so maybe one last question for you, Sarah. And then I think we should open this all up to everybody. So, if when you think about how another investor, might want to use this catalytic capital approach, could you kind of, just paint a picture for us of the kind of scenario or the kind of company where you think an investor might really want to explore using this kind of a grant? And then what could happen in the future? And you've already alluded a little bit to what might happen with you and EOS in the future, but if I'm just an investor and I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, how could I use this approach in my own community? What thoughts do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I can speak to the way that we were thinking about this. So considering our debt investment criteria, we were looking at revenues around 250K and up. And what we wanted to address was that right before being a qualified candidate time period. So more around the 75K or so. These are just ballparks that we came up with in order to try to hone in on the type of companies that we're looking at. So quote unquote early stage companies, but validated business models, sound practices, And in terms of thinking about it from a broader perspective of if I wasn't myself, if I was a different investor lens, a different criteria, I would want to say it would be super helpful, I think, to be able to not only seed pipeline if you were doing something like direct investments for debt or even equity, but also part of your grant making strategy. And that's what I find super interesting here. Obviously, our foundation, we're really big on promoting the program related investment concept and pushing the needle forward on how can we be a little bit more innovative in that. So we actually earn returns off our debt investments, for example. But taking one step back, this Delta concept could be hugely beneficial in that it takes a village of support for companies to grow and be successful, to really create sustainable interventions at the development level across the landscape. So that's probably why we're all passionate about this space, is the innovation concept around how do we promote market-based mechanisms to address these aid and development needs that have so far and so long been kind of monolithic and very much an aid paradigm. So thinking about it from that perspective, not only could a Delta opportunity take off some grant making strategies by supporting the ecosystem, but also seeding your pipeline for debt or equity investment. So specifically for us, EOS is a great example because I have always wanted to do a direct investment for a water company, but tried my darndest to find one that's investment ready, and that wasn't possible. And I thought Wes is hugely experienced in this space, and completely, this is the type of entrepreneur I would like to work with as an investor in the future for a straight up investment. So it allowed us to be a little bit more quote unquote high risk, but higher impact. So we got to prioritize impact first and foremost, because unfortunately, I feel like you as an impact investor are looking for ready deals and you're like, well, okay, they have some sustainable supply chain impact. That's great. But are they really servicing that low income population and eradicating poverty to the degree that you would wish or that you would want if it was a grant? So this kind of addresses that. It allows you to have a higher impact lens and a higher impact focus. And I think it's really useful to think about, especially at the board level. I know a lot of boards have a problem thinking in terms of innovation. Ours had that as well. This concept was a little off the wall. It was a little unheard of, but mental models change slowly. And I think the best way to do it is exactly that. Treat it like a pilot, try to get involved, find a good partner. I obviously think Agora is a fantastic partner for this. Just the caliber of the community, the caliber of the companies that are being part of this community. I think collaboration is key here. And the idea being that it's not so bespoke, not so custom. We're not cherry picking our engagements with companies, but rather truly growing alongside them. And I think that's where we as investors need to be thinking, is a little bit more longer term. We're willing to make an equity investment, have that be married to the company, but we're not willing to kind of seed and do this early stage stuff as an impact investor, which I find interesting. Not everyone, obviously, but I think we need to be a little bit more deliberate about it.
That's great. Thank you. Well, I'd love to open this up to questions from anybody for any of us. And
I think, Ben, I think Sammy had his hand raised a while back. So Sammy, if you want to make the first question, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ben and Sarah and Wes. This is really interesting. I congratulate you for a really creative model with Delta. I think it's terrific. I read your article. But I have a question. Say an entrepreneur needs, say, 50 grand, and he needs 25 grand for capacity building, and then 25 grand to be able to implement his revenue model, right? So basically, this entrepreneur can give back to the ESO, in other words, to Agora, for example, 25 grand back in the next 12 to 24 months. But the other 25,000, the entrepreneur needs it just as a regular grant for capacity building or whatever, or infrastructure, whatnot. So is this possible within the model? I mean, could you have like a blended type of investment from the ESO?
Well, I can take that. And then, if Sarah has a different opinion, the beauty of this is that we're all co-creating it. So the way that we did the Delta grant is not going to be the exact same way as someone else does it. That being said, I think there are certain characteristics that should not change. So in that particular scenario that you just presented, the way that I would do it is I would say, well, we're making a Delta grant of 25,000, and this has to be repaid, and we're going to judge the effectiveness, pretty much based on sales growth, revenue growth, and did you repay it? And are you a stronger organization now than you were before? Now, for the capacity building grant, I would do that on a separate track. It could be together, but I would look at that differently, and I would judge its effectiveness differently. And what I like about, and I can tell you right now, in that scenario, it's probably going to be faster to do the Delta grant in a way, because for many people, okay, I now have to create a $25,000 proposal. I have to explain all of this to the funder. It's all bespoke. It all takes time. If the funder says no, I might be screwed. I might not have another funder. So it's tricky. Whereas with the Delta, you have something that is concrete and simple, and it's just kind of easy to do. And that is a really important part of what we're trying to do, is create a product that is easy. I would love it if other entrepreneur support organizations went to their investor base and said, hey, we would love to get some Delta funding here so we can make investments in this way into the top companies that we see. And for a funder to say, oh, Delta, yes, I get it. We can do this quickly. This is what I care about. I'll do it if you have companies that, meet this criteria or are working in that sector. I care about that. I'll do it. So that's part of what we want to do with this whole concept. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to add one thing. Ben, I think you did absolutely explain it well. I think the only component I would kind of address specifically to your question around capacity building, the way that we saw it, exactly what Ben is saying, sometimes we want it to be siloed a little bit. So the nature of Delta and this recoverable grant is not like a typical recoverable grant. We want the company to see it as working capital. So we want them to treat it as working capital. So if it's capacity building that lends itself to that, for the example of Wes, marketing and adding those types of things, that type of infrastructure and build out, and tying that to repayment in a way that makes sense and doesn't create some sort of undue burden just because we're classifying it or misclassifying it. And that's exactly what I mean. So there's still a space for that initial capacity building grant. It might be in concert, it might be prior to doing a recoverable grant. The way that I see it is a company or a social enterprise nonprofit will use grant funding for the vast majority of the base, laying the base of the model. And once the model is established and they're ready to kind of ramp up the earned revenue and decrease the donor revenue, that's when they're ready for the recoverable grant. And then once that's been proven and the earned revenue and that cash flow can sustain and repay a loan in this case, that's when they're ready for a loan. So that's the way that I've seen it. So that's what I mean by it will be custom for each investor, thinking about what stages they want to engage with the company at, because it's going to take some thinking around how do we kind of redefine our different levels of engagement.
Got it. Thank you.
Then we have a question from YouTube by Gustavo Pineiro. He wants to know from you and Sarah, what are the tax implications, and if this risk your 501 status?
Yeah, so great question. And the answer is no, not really. I mean, so what's the risk to Sarah? Sarah is donating to a 501c3 nonprofit. That's what she's doing. And so there's no risk on her side. On our side, we are actually re-granting that. So it's a recoverable grant technically. And we are doing that because of the social mission of the organization. And so because there is no benefit that accrues to Sarah or any other investor, the only benefit is that we get our recoverable grant back. There's no issue with the IRS. And, to Gustavo, who asked the question, I mean, it's a board's responsibility to be kind of, conservative, and it's, lawyers and accountants' responsibility to be very conservative. But we are in a space where I think that it's okay to push a little bit the envelope here, and try to be as innovative as we can, because we're at that point where we're really thinking about how do you kind of mix and blend for-profit investing and grant investing. And it is true that if you're not careful, you could have a problem. But the way that it's structured right now, and this has been vetted by lawyers from Clifford Chance, which is our pro bono law firm that has been helping us with this, and I can say, and Wes knows this very well, the contract that we give to Wes, it looks like a very long legal contract. And it's designed that way because we want to make it clear to Wes that to any entrepreneur that we expect this to be repaid, because there is a bit of a moral hazard whenever you are giving a recoverable grant. I mean, just look at the PPP in the United States, which were basically recoverable grants, and most people are not going to repay those. So there is a moral hazard there, but I think you get over that by good old-fashioned trust and getting to know the entrepreneur and recognizing that actually incentives are aligned. And when you do that, you actually don't, you cease to operate, like a bank that is operating under the assumption that, everyone needs to be collateralized because you don't really trust. But this is sort of more old-fashioned. We've gotten to know the organization, we built trust, and now it's about, giving the entrepreneur that opportunity. So great question. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just add one comment around specifically for nonprofit foundations. For us, we usually, in our mission, we usually do not fund intermediaries. So internally that did come up. So what we did was add an addendum and include that in our tax filings to include intermediary organizations, just to cover our assets. And just a broad comment about recoverable grants. If a nonprofit grant maker was to do a recoverable grant directly, and that came back on the books, that just increases the total asset value of which you calculate your annual grant giving requirements.
Lorena, you want to make your question directly?
Sure, thank you, Alan. First, thank you for sharing such valuable information for us and truly inspiring. My question is there any reputational risk that you have identified for corporate foundations for us to implement this model? And also, if there is a limitation for related businesses to our corporation to invest with us?
Yeah. Well, I would say that there are two variables here for reputational risk. What does the company end up doing, and what does the entrepreneur support organization end up doing? Because those are the two kind of partners that you have. So I think, as with any analysis of corporate risk, reputational risk, you're going to want to look at the entrepreneur support organization pretty carefully. The way that the Delta concept has been designed, it's not an ideal product for very early stage entrepreneur support organizations, in part because you have to have some financial wherewithal, because the way that we have structured it, in this case, Agora is not really making much money up front at all. There's a very small kind of initiation fee, but that's about it. So we have to be big enough to be able to not get our money back for 2 or 3 years, right? So I would suggest that there are many entrepreneur support organizations that are wonderful, that have great reputations, that any corporate could consider partnering with. And what I think is beautiful about this is it's almost a way for a corporate foundation to have its own sort of seed stage pilot innovative fund that actually has a portfolio of different companies. So if I were running, FEMSA Foundation, and if there were a particular kind of company that I wanted to support as part of my strategy, I could imagine, creating a Delta fund that would go to invest in 10 of those kind of companies. You might do it all through one entrepreneur support organization, or you could even do it through a couple and kind of compare and contrast. At the end of the day, there will be very clear, transparent impact. What happened to the company? Did that money help the company grow or not? It could be a way of seeding a pipeline for your own corporate foundation, but it also could be just a way of supporting the ecosystem by providing that kind of catalytic capital that no one else will provide. But interestingly, you're not ultimately providing a grant to the company. And I'm not a huge fan of grants to companies. Sometimes companies need grants, but I think a 0% recoverable loan is a very appropriate financial tool for early stage companies that are solving social problems. So to answer your question, really, Lorena, I would say that you have to take into account the key partner. In this case, it's probably going to be the entrepreneur support organization. That's how you would get scale. And then your staff doesn't need to become experts on any of this stuff. But you do need to vet that ESO carefully, because that's probably where that reputational risk would be.
Thank you so much, Ben. Great seeing you again.
Likewise.
Any other question? Ben, I'm wondering from your side, because you have to be very patient, so you have to wait, from my understanding, you have to wait for 2 entrepreneurs to repay their 0% interest loan. So how are you funded? How is it that you're able to be so patient? Is it because you're also getting a donation from another funder, or how do you fund this mechanism?
Yeah, well, that is a great question, and we still have some internal discussions about this, because it does put cash flow pressure on any organization that's doing it this way. I think that for us, we have other programs that in essence cross-subsidize, and the more we're successful in our mission of getting capital to companies, the stronger our brand, the better able we are to attract great companies, because that is another whole battle of how does our sector attract the best entrepreneurs and get them to think a little differently, so that when they go out and they grow their companies are really creating impact. And that's a very important kind of battle that we are engaged in with sometimes other more for-profit accelerator programs. But it is something that we think about and talk about, and we may tweak it a little bit in the future, but the reality is, I think that keeping this pretty clean, making it really be an investment that where the money really does go to the entrepreneur, but if the ESO is successful, then it can continue to be strengthened. And so my hope is that a year, 2 years from now, Agora is growing, and then all of a sudden we start getting a bunch of unrestricted funding coming in as this comes in. And that we can then use to hire the people that we want and to strengthen our own organization. And the theory here is that if you are what I would say a good entrepreneur support organization, meaning that you are managing to optimize not just to support the entrepreneurs in your program, but also to be a very good partner in the field. If you do all of that, this grant is going to strengthen you and help you to be a better actor in the ecosystem. And that ultimately, I think, very big picture is kind of what we need, you know. But if anyone were to say to me, hey, Ben, this cash flow looks terrible. How can I help you with that? You know, we're more than happy to talk to folks about that. But, you know, I do think that the way it's structured now, it does put pressure on the short term, but I think in the long term, it makes it a simpler grant product to understand. And you can certainly, you know, add a couple percentage points here or there if it turns out that you know, Wes has been great. We haven't had to spend huge amounts of staff time, you know, dealing with Wes's problems, you know, because EOS is doing a great job and we're there for them, but we haven't needed to spend a lot of time and effort. Why? Because we already spent that time and effort. So it doesn't work if you haven't already gotten to know these entrepreneurs, right? We couldn't do this with entrepreneurs that we don't know. We only do it with entrepreneurs that have gone through our program and that we've gotten to know, because then we feel that, you know, that we don't have that reputational risk. I mean, it lowers our risk because we've gotten to know these entrepreneurs in a way that would be very expensive for us if we had to do it, you know, from the start, if that makes sense.
I think Alex has a question.
Yes, thank you. And in a way, Ben, I'm delighted to see you. You answered it. It was related to your question, Alan, as well. But before I go into that, first, kudos to the three of you, right? Wes for the impact you're creating, Ben for you know, pushing the boundaries and building the ecosystem and developing that, and Sarah for being courageous and taking risks that others don't take and push the envelope. The three of you guys are pushing the envelope. And I'm delighted that you're here as the three of you, because this is what Latin Impacto was created for, right? To push the boundaries and find solutions like this. And this is a beautiful example. So kudos to you. And I know this is only the beginning, and I'm sure all three of you have aspirations for much larger scale impact, but this is the type of things and solutions we need to find and come up with for real impact in Latin America. So thank you for being here. My question was similar to what Alan said. I was thinking about how do you, when you design something like this, how do you balance the different goals you're trying to achieve, right? The ecosystem development, the supporting entrepreneurs, you know, how many revolving cycles of those repayable loans can you actually build in that the organization can survive? And I kind of heard you answer. My question on that is, were there any other design elements that you guys considered and ruled out when coming up with this? You know, I don't know if it's more, you know, revolving cycles or different types of interest, or are there elements that you considered and you didn't apply, or was it simply clear in your mind, this is the way it needs to look, and this is the way we're going to implement it? Thank you.
Oh, that's a great question. Sarah, I'm happy to answer that. If you want to start, that's fine too.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, so yes, we went back and forth quite a lot thinking about this, but what we had settled on, we thought, okay, maybe perhaps we'll do a different grant, and that would be for the impact consulting and creating the modules. Basically, we had them create a framework, and then it's custom support for each company depending on their needs and their goals and milestones. But what we decided on ultimately was to treat the entire pool of funding that was earmarked for Delta and use a portion of that to cover the operational cost, the upfront cost for developing those types of things. So the staff cost associated with that.
Yeah, and so, I mean, there were definitely, you know, I wouldn't say that 100% of that went to the company. There was some work done because, you know, as Sarah mentioned, you know, there was a lot of discussion to make sure that we can measure the impact, you know, and that required upfront work that needed to be paid for. I would say that, there are a lot of ways that you could iterate on this model. You could do 1 cycle. You could do 3 cycles. I could imagine, and it would depend. If you were going to do something bigger, multi-year, you might want to, do 2 or even 3 cycles, because your money is really being used pretty effectively, because it's getting recycled into the ecosystem, and then it's finally coming back to that ESO. So I think there's often a give and take. Is it 1 cycle? Is it 3 cycles? And that's a negotiation. I think, you could certainly envision a Delta fund where you say, look, we want to be making, we have $25,000, let's say, per company. 5,000 of that will go to support, post-investment consulting, and the other 20,000 will go to the company as a Delta. So you could imagine for smaller organizations that can't, who don't have the cash, who have cash flow pressure and can't just do this without getting paid, you could imagine tweaks to it. I think what's really, I think the heart of the Delta concept is this idea of enlisting the entrepreneur support organization as a true partner. And even though they're not investors and they're not, investing with you, they are kind of there to support you. Your incentives are aligned, and it may not be their own money, but they're going to receive that money back if that company grows and can repay the loan. So it's this notion of collaboration, and seeing the, recognizing that for all of this to work, you need to find and support entrepreneurs like Wes. You need more investors like Sarah. You need more success stories, and you need to be experimenting with a similar product all over Latin America, and then beginning to compare notes. And then you can begin to understand, well, why did that company, what was it about that company that allowed it to repay the Delta fund, and that company didn't? But it becomes, I think, kind of a front line, a front line in sort of innovative finance, in pioneering finance, to help get that critical catalytic capital to the right entrepreneurs. And it's incredibly difficult to do that if you're not working with an organization that is really focused on developing pipeline, because that is not easy to do. And the ones that are successful that typically don't go through any accelerator typically are entrepreneurs who are, extremely well-resourced to begin with. So I do want to make a plea for understanding the importance that these entrepreneur support organizations play. And it's not just about helping entrepreneurs raise money. It's much more than that. That is just one component. It is truly about knowledge, networks, and capital. And it's how those 3 intersect and support each other that ultimately determines how effective an entrepreneur support organization is. So
Ben, I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. And I think Sammy wanted to make another question.
No, I just was wondering, because we don't have that many ESOs back in Colombia or in other countries. So I guess you're referring to American ESOs that invest in Latin entrepreneurs like yourselves.
Well, we have, I don't know how many ESOs there actually are in Latin America, but we have, there's a task force that was co-created by many ESOs, which Agora is helping to lead. And I think it has over, 55 organizations in Latin America. So, and we're actually talking with Compartamos con Colombia. You could consider Compartamos con Colombia potentially as the kind of ESO. And I use that word kind of broadly, and I'm actually using that word deliberately because I don't want to use the word intermediary, which I really think does a disservice to the work that these organizations provide. So there are not enough ESOs, and they are not as strong as they should be. And that's part of why the Delta Fund concept is so interesting, because it does actually acknowledge the role that ESOs play. And so, you know, Agora, we've worked with probably 30 companies in Colombia. We're not physically in Colombia right now, but we've been able to do a lot of work in Colombia, which I'm really proud of. And that's just us. There are many other organizations, and you know, as I talk about the Delta Fund, I really think it's a way for ESOs to kind of, you know, show up and say, hey, look what we're doing, and we've been successful. It's a very easy way of turning ESOs, which are not truly investors, you know, to be able to judge themselves on some investor metrics that are very clear and transparent. And I think that is really important, because there's so much ambiguity and complexity right now in this space, that having a couple products that are standardized, that people can relate to, and that you don't have to, you know, have a big conference call to actually explain to people what it is, because people now get it. I think that would make it easier for local ESOs and local investors to actually find ways of working together, because it is sometimes hard to convince a foundation or an investor to simply provide funding to an ESO. This way, I think it's easier, and it makes it more attractive. And if you are an investor and you care about a particular kind of group that you think is really important to the development of your community, you can then go to an ESO and have a conversation about, hey, we're thinking about supporting a whole bunch of entrepreneurs, and but the way we're thinking about doing it is through this Delta Fund concept. Are you interested? You know, and that means that if you're an ESO and you hear that, you know, if you're successful, you might have a lot of money coming to you in 2 or 3 years. Now that changes the game. You might be able to get other foundation support. There's all kinds of things that they're pieces on the chessboard that you have now that you didn't have before. So that's why I think it's an interesting, you know, model to explore.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrific. It's a win-win, because the ESO also wins. The ESO, when it gets the money back, can strengthen its position, can improve its performance, can learn from the entrepreneurs' experiences. I mean, they get the funding when the money's back. And so the ESO is basically strengthened in the process. So that is, I mean, it's a win-win for everyone. So yeah, I get it.
And it's even more than that, is that the ESOs are typically, the people they employ are local. They're from the local community, and there's many local entrepreneurs who are running ESOs. And this is in contrast to a lot of the big development, which is done by big USAID contractors. It's all project-based. And I think we need to move beyond putting all of our money into something that will last 3 years and then disintegrate. And that has been the US government's strategy for development, you know, for the last 50 years. And it's a much better strategy to be actually supporting the young Colombian who is working at an ESO and is hoping that they can have an actual career in helping entrepreneurs succeed. Like, that's what you want to be investing in my opinion.
Yeah. And actually this thing, I mean, sorry to, you know, sort of monopolize the discussion, but I mean, this thing really is helping the ESOs and the entrepreneurs as well. And so the grantors, do they know where the money is destined to go, or they just give the grants to give the money over to the ESOs, and the ESOs decide where to invest in entrepreneurs? That's one question. The other thing, Ben, is that there's no real, I mean, you don't own the concept. Anyone can do it, really. It's very simple. So, I mean, there's no like royalties or anything for you invented this or whoever did this, but there's no, I mean, Anyone can do it. It's so simple.
It's
Any
so
grant can go out and do it. I mean, there's no monopoly on this.
no. I would just say if you do it, tag it, because you could create a whole community of practice around these kinds of grants. And I think, frankly, it's something that could be piloted in Latin America. It's not rocket science, it's really not. But by putting a name to it, you begin to give it, something, that it didn't have before. And what does that do? That just increases the communication. That is what we need. And to answer your prior question,
I mean, Sarah did know that this was going.
Sarah knew, yeah. Sarah knew. I don't think you have to know.
We created that deliberately. So the concept being that we would still do our typical diligence activities, but the only difference being we're taking them from a pool of Agora alumni and we're including Agora in those conversations for diligence. So that lent itself to essentially the vast majority of the diligence and management work was still on World Impact, and Agora came alongside it. That's not to say that for other reiterations of the Delta concept, you could ask the ESO to look at your criteria and do some of that diligence activities. But for our case, we wanted to have high involvement. So as he said, it's co-created. So absolutely everything. Yeah, very high touch.
Yeah, and that made sense for the pilot. And I think for a lot of foundations, it will continue to make sense. I think if you're a larger foundation, it might, it might not make sense because that might not be your core mission.
Yeah, the idea is to save them some time and effort for small grants. So that's why ESO comes in. So, but this is just a pilot. I got it. Thank you.
So Ben, Sarah, and Wes, thank you very much. I'm not sure before we close if you have any closing remarks or any call for action that you want to share with the rest of our community.
Well, I would like to actually just take this opportunity to thank Wes and Sarah. Really appreciate not only you showing up today, but just what you're doing every day, right? And I think we do. I'm looking at one of the comments. I think we do need more LPs like Sarah that are willing to sort of take this risk and build this community, because the reality is that there is certain kinds of investment that needs to be made at the early stage that is truly catalytic, that is not going to return a lot of money, but it's still needed. And if you have the resources, this is a really effective way of investing, in my opinion. I also wanted to just take the opportunity to introduce Cecilia Foxworthy to everybody. She is our new CEO at Agora, and she is helping to co-create this task force that I think is extremely exciting. It's the first instance I've ever seen of ESOs across Latin America uniting and coming up with a common agenda based on bottom-up solutions, which is what is needed. And so she's running that. And I just, if any of you want to be working with Agora or want to learn more, I encourage you to, follow up. I'm happy to introduce you personally to Cecilia. She's on this call. She's fantastic. And she just became our CEO last week after working at the organization for many years. So I think we have a very strong leader in Latin America to work with all of you. And I just wanted to, introduce her to everyone. So this has been really wonderful. I don't know, Wes or Sarah, do you want to say anything? Final words?
Just thank you for sure, Ben and Sarah. I feel like I'm on the receiving end of this as the entrepreneur, and you guys just made this investment even easier. Obviously, yeah, I'm kind of a guinea pig, but it was a very easy one. So the recoverable grant, all the terms working with us, and so great experience from my perspective. And again, appreciate everyone for speaking. So this is great.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo that. Thank you so much, everyone, for having us. And I appreciate the opportunity to discuss these ideas and kind of put it out there. And I do have a hope that this will continue to be replicated. And if anyone does want to talk ideas or concepts or ask a little bit more nitty-gritty questions, I'm available to you. So feel free to reach out. Happy to continue that conversation.
We do have a challenge spreading the word.
Sorry, Sammy?
You do have a challenge spreading the word because this is new and nobody really knows about it. So that's, if we could all help, we'll be happy to help spread this word and about the Delta model. Terrific.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. And if any of you end up doing one, let's share that, because I think we could create a community of practice around this model. And as I've talked to ESO leaders from other regions, there's a lot of interest in this. And it's it's a different way of doing strategic philanthropy, you know, in the field. And I think Latin America, being a place that actually has a tradition of entrepreneurship, is a really, really great place to pilot this.
Thank you.
So again, Ben, Wes, Sarah, thank you for joining us. It was really great to hear from you. I think it was food for thought. I think it allows our members to really think differently and find ways to better leverage their financial, intellectual, and human capital. And so thank you once again. And for the community of Practive members, we have 1 month we'll meet again and probably have a wrap up around the entire year and plan for next year. So looking forward to that. And thank you everybody who participated, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you.